Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of America's Black Robe Regiment, our podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have with us Chris Evans, a good friend for many, many years in our past, in our times at Regent University when we were doing homeschooling down there as our kids grew up. We're just so excited to
Mhm.
have you, Chris. You're an author, a mom, a great mom. You're an author, and you're awakening of Virginians to the true history of Jamestown. We're so glad for that. We're so glad that you're helping people understand the true nature of history in Virginia. So, Chris,
Thank
thanks for
you.
joining us today. Thank you so much for being with us. And wanted to ask you to begin with this lovely book that was illustrated by your son, James. Um,
Yes.
what was the inspiration behind writing this for you? What inspired you to
Well,
write it?
as you say, I've known you all for many years, and in 1992, I started homeschooling, and I actually partnered up with your dear wife somewhat with that, and I really wanted to do a good job at homeschooling, and history being one of my favorite topics. I started researching. We live right here in Virginia, and I started saying to myself, this is not the history that I learned. Things have been changed, left out. And so I began to do my own research, reaching out for historians who like me believed in a providential view of history and who exhibited a biblical worldview. And I thought those are two components that can help you search out the truth and discern the truth. So in all of that search, I started, as I say, meeting people because I had friends that would say to me at the church that we all attended, "Oh, Chris, if you love history this much, you need to meet these people and those people." And so I started collecting cohorts, and then I just began to collect information and store it in 3-ring binders, and that's how I started, and then I got involved with Stonebridge School and had a lot of friends there, and I began doing PowerPoint presentations and with images, pictures, um, lines of information. And I had some homeschool mothers who would come to me after training, and this one particular time, especially in 2014, who said, "Chris, we love the stories because I'm a storyteller. I like making it real and telling the personal side of it all. Um, you don't have any of this written down. You're telling it to us." I said, "Yes." "Oh, well, you must write it down." Well, that was the beginning of me thinking that, gee, I never thought of myself as an author. I thought of myself as someone who loved our Christian heritage and wanted to preserve the truth. And in that, eventually, we published my book. First came out in 2017, and then it fell out of print for a while. Here it is.
Nice. What is the name of it? Odyssey?
Odyssey of Faith, The Colony of Virginia, Jamestown,
Yes.
and
Right?
You. And because it's written from primary sources and because it's made from truth, even though it's distilled down for the understandability of 9, 10, 11-year olds, still everyone can learn something from it. And there's nothing else like this book. We've done my research, my writing partner, I did all the research. My writing partner, Max Lyons, and I did research on the computer, Googled for books like this, and there's nothing out there like this written for children to understand. And so it's meant to be an introduction. And
Okay.
I have really developed quite the library of older books and many resources. And I
Chris,
actually
why don't
have
you
an
hold that book up for us again so we can see it? Just see the cover of the book, just so people can get the title of the book and possibly order it. Odyssey of Faith.
Yeah, The Colony of
It's a great
Virginia,
book.
Jamestown, and You. And my son did not only the cover, but all the
Beautiful.
illustrations inside.
Beautiful.
And there's a beautiful one of Pocahontas. And what Captain John Smith wrote about Pocahontas is that God made Pocahontas, and he believed that providentially. Captain John Smith um, was a strong Protestant Christian of that time of the English Protestant Reformation. That's one thing that people do not understand about the founding of Virginia is the key element of the English Protestant Reformation on that journey. People think of the English Reformation as just a political move of Henry VIII, and he had his own personal and political reasons for wanting to separate from England. But God used that in the hearts of the pastors of the day, leading congregations, and that is the truth of the refer. Oh yes, and part of that difference in the English Protestant Reformation from what was happening in Europe in the Great Reformation is that the English leaders, the biblical scholars, and all they added they added the biblical truth of government, and some people would want to call it politics, but the principles of government was something um, that were added in the English Protestant Reformation that wasn't happening in Europe so much. And so that's why we can credit the Protestant Christians in England and the Puritans for giving us the government we have, is because
Yes.
in their view that they gave us our roots of liberty. But it happened right here too in Virginia. Virginia was not left out of that Protestant explosion. And behind me, I have a map, which is very much behind me, so you can't really see it. But I have a map drawn out by Warren Billings. That shows the expansion of the English from 1607 through 1624, and it's 47 settlements up and down the James River. People want to mention the colony of Jamestown as if nothing happened anywhere else but there, and that's not true. They began the Jamestown was the fort, the army fort for protection from the Spanish, from whom they were terrified, but also protection from the Algonquin Indian Nation, because they were very hostile to the gospel and hostile to the English. They were a pagan group, and they had already had bad experiences. Go ahead. Did you want to ask?
I wanted to
No,
ask you,
keep going. You're doing great.
what I wanted to say real quick was that I'm watching this evolution as a mom, right? You started out as a mom being curious, and you wanted your
Yes.
children to learn the truth. And so that's why you were bringing a lot of this forward. And then, of course, you expanded it into the homeschooling, where I often wonder today if our children are being fed even the correct history, because so many things have been removed from secular
Mhm.
school.
Right.
So what you're doing is very admirable. What was some of the shocking things that you discovered when you went down this rabbit trail of Virginia history?
Well, a very beautiful thing, actually. It was quite shocking, but also quite beautiful. Is I discovered a man of this Tudor period, and his name is Richard Hakluyt. Richard Hakluyt was an orphan, and he was orphaned at a very young age, and was given to his cousin, who was also Richard Hakluyt. Why do we do that to our children? We do that today. We name them after the someone in our family. But so anyway, he was 5 or 6 years old. He also had little brothers, and so this older Hacklet cousin took them in and raised them. They did not have they didn't have much money, but God gave Richard Hacklet a brilliant mind. And through the connections of the older cousin, Richard, he was able to connect him to Queen Elizabeth's scholar, let's see, scholar award, and he was educated by the English crown, by Elizabeth I, and so he grew up. He grew up in a Christian environment. He became a solid, dedicated Protestant man, and he also traveled back and forth from the school in London that he attended, and also his uncle's home. So I have a picture here that my son drew this rendering of Richard Hakluyt the elder, showing his young charge, the young Richard Hakluyt, all of the people groups that were being discovered around the world, and as a little boy, he was 14. So at this particular point, and these things are quotes that I found, and so he says about himself as a lad of 14. And he was looking at all the maps in his older cousin's studio, who was he was a lawyer, he was a map maker, and he was saddened by the fact that all these people groups were being located, but they weren't finding evangelization happening. And so he says, and I found it as a quote. He actually said this, that if the Lord allowed him to continue to grow up and to become an educated man, that he wanted to proactively bring the gospel to these people groups around the world. Now, there was another thing about him, and this was
And this was at the age of 14?
At the age of 14, yes. And he had a favorite scripture in Psalms. I do believe it was Psalms 107 that yes, 107, 23, and 24. And this was his heart as a young fella, that and this is in the Bible, it's Psalms 107. They which go down to the sea in ships and occupied their business in great waters, these see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. And it said, I believe God will use me to cross the ocean to tell these people about Jesus.
Amazing.
So that's a wonderful noble thing for a very young boy. And this is another point that I picked up in reading this, that it says that and occupied their business in great waters. The the Protestant Reformation, and even in England with Martin Luther, elevated man's labor to vocation. And one of the scriptures that came out of that was the workman is worthy of his hire. So it was no longer thought of as getting your fingers dirty to actually create business. It has also been brought down through the centuries that ministry takes money. And so the Virginia Company developed out of the permission granted by the king to bring people over here. So they had to have money. They had to have money to build the ships, to hire the ship captains, to recruit the people to come. And Virginia history has so many puzzle pieces, and it would take so much longer to really give you an understanding. But I want to say this one other thing. Then and here's another picture. See, this is for little children, to get them excited about what they're reading about. This is Richard Hakluyt here in the fold of the book. And he is saying, and this was quoted in Richard Hakluyt's Discourse on Western Planting, published in 1584. So he says to Queen Elizabeth, because he had her ear, she liked him, and he was part of her council. He was in her
So special. At 14. Isn't that just
Well, no,
remarkable?
he's a grown man by now.
Oh, he's a grown man.
By
Okay,
now
gotcha.
he has become educated and he's in her in her
Amazing.
purview. So he says to her to went to see Queen Elizabeth and she agreed to the settlement as he said, we shall by planting in America enlarge the glory of the gospel and provide a safe place to receive people from all parts of the world that are forced to flee for the truth of God's word. Now, is that amazing? I found
That is
that one day
amazing.
Yes,
at
yes.
work in my office, and I was so excited. I jumped up out of my seat and I ran around the corner to tell my friends Max Lyons, look what I found. That is a quote from Richard Hakluyt. That is the embryo of our religious liberty in America. And one of the people, I began to do a
Amen.
little more study about what was happening in 1584. One of the people groups that Richard Hakluyt would have had in his heart and mind and wanting to fulfill this quote that I just read to you were the French Huguenots, which were being persecuted beyond belief, beyond of any group that can tag onto themselves, we've been persecuted, like in England or whatever. The French Huguenots, which meant French Protestants, and they were connected to the Geneva Bible and John Calvin, and they were martyred in the streets, and it was horrific what happened to them. But anyway, and some of those French Huguenots, among many other people, but they are a important group. They came to came to England for safety, and then a lot of them came from England over to the colonies, and contributed to the American colonies, the French Huguenots, as you
I
know.
don't know about you, Bill, but I'm getting fed by a fire hose.
I know. That's what I mean.
We
There's
knew
just so much.
when Chris
I,
got started,
I'm
she
sure
could
that
just go.
I'm sure that our viewing audience is sitting there going, "Oh my goodness, how do I learn more about this?" So this is just an introduction in all these years of study that you've been doing, correct? And kind
Yes.
of writing. I remember the despair I felt when they were taking down all of our monuments. I shouldn't say all, that's an incorrect word. They were taking down so many of our monuments during this time
Yes.
of destruction in the United States. And I thought, we need to maintain some type of correct history because now you have
Right.
ChatGPT, you have, AI, you have all this stuff coming up, and you just wonder if the truth is going to be told in the future. So what you have put together is really important, I
Yes,
think,
it
for the
is.
Thank
future.
you.
Have it in paper and pen, and it's actually available and it's researched. Because there's so much misinformation out there, and people are very cautious about it, whether it be right or whether it be wrong. And
Yes.
so the fact that you have all this research is really, really impressive.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And you can get my book on Amazon right now. And
Okay.
you just go to
And the
Amazon
name again?
and type in the title, and it will come right up. You can order it. It's only $19.99. And
And
if
the name of it again, just so they know?
I'm sorry.
The name again?
Amazon.com.
Yeah,
The name of the book again?
Amazon Books, Amazon.com. You go to Amazon Books and you just type in Odyssey of Faith, the Colony of
Odyssey
Virginia.
of Faith, everybody. Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to give a shout out right now. I think it's a perfect segue, Bill, as we are here today because this podcast is sponsored by Cardio Miracle and John Hewlett, who's a massive, massive patriot.
Yes, he
Loves
is.
the Lord with all his heart, loves family, stands on the same principles we do, pro-life, and getting the people elected that need to be elected that can make really historical change. And we're watching that every single day unfold. So we want that to continue, right, with our youth and our children. And so what you're doing is
Yes,
really,
indeed.
really important. But when he put together this product, and I say it all the time, I never get weary of saying that. And because I always say we can't fight with a sick body. So
Oh,
we have gone through millions of people that have been so sick in the last 5 years. And so they're struggling to get their health back. And I really appreciate what Cardio Miracle has done. It's brought to the forefront and brought to the best to their ability, the most perfect food. We're talking about food, not supplementation,
Mm,
talking about food. And so if you can actually live on this, because there's over 700 nutrients and over 58 ingredients. So not only is a nitric oxide
mm.
booster, but it also has all these other wonderful, lovely nutrients to heal the body at the cellular level and for us to be able to accomplish things we didn't before. So aging is just a misnomer. And we take products such as this that are changing our lives every single day. And I know, Bill, you had a story, didn't you?
Yeah, I wanted to say, the last time I had a full physical, the doctor came back in and told me, said, your blood pressure is the blood pressure of a teenager.
Mm.
And I was glad to hear that. At 70 years old, you're glad to hear that.
Yeah,
So
you
almost
bet.
70
Yes,
years
the
old.
extensive travel that I do, I'm telling you, it's a
Thank you, John
wonder.
Hewlett.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for your support. So, but back to you, Chris. I think you'd really
Chris, I got a
enjoy.
question for you.
Yes,
How does your
Yes.
story compare with what kids are taught in public schools today? What are they
Well,
being
they're
told in
told.
schools about Jamestown?
Yeah, they're told very little, and they're told that Jamestown is a colony. That's the first misnomer right there. Jamestown was not the colony; it was a settlement within the colony. It was actually the army fort, and people are not. That's not explained to them,
Mhm.
and they're taught that Captain John Smith was a dictator, which is totally the opposite of what was true. One little incident about that is that Captain John Smith was the third president of the council in Virginia. He was the third, and the second man was tortured to death by the Indians. And they came to John Smith. All those men came to John Smith unanimously and recruited him and begged him to run. And then they voted him in as president of the governing council. There were 11 of them, and then the pastor. And you wouldn't unanimously recruit somebody and then unanimously vote them into office if you didn't hold them um,
High regard.
in high esteem. Yeah. So they're told that. Oh yeah, well, they're told that the Africans who came over in 1619 on the two ships were brought in as slaves, and that um, there is no historic evidence that that's what happened. They were indentured like everybody else was. They brought those 20 and odd, which make there to be they always say about 27 of the Africans, and paid for their voyage and their supplies and everything. And so then they asked them to pay them back by being indentured to the farmers there. And they were skilled in what they knew from Africa, and they helped them. And then after 7 years or so, they, were released out into the colony. And there's a whole lot more to that story too, but that's one thing that is emphasized. And as bad as it was later on, 16 in the late 1660s is when slavery was codified into Virginia law, and it was forced on them by King Charles II. But
Oh,
it up until then, it was completely open, and there is strong evidence that many or an element of those 20 and odd Africans married European women. So and in England, they did not have slavery up until this point. They had indentured servants for generations. People would indenture their children to someone wealthy so they could learn a trade. They or what or the like. They had indenturism for centuries, but not England didn't have slavery, so it wasn't something that they were looking to um, start here. You know, you did have to have some sort of skill to contribute. I like to say, it makes people laugh. I like to say James the First was not offering Section 8 housing over here. You had to have something to contribute to
yeah.
to the colony, you know.
It's amazing how history gets revised, isn't it, Chris? Wanted to ask
Yes.
you to tell us a little bit about Reverend Robert Hunt, Captain John Smith, and Pocahontas.
Well, Robert Hunt was actually Richard Hacklett's friend, and Robert Hunt was an Englishman. And I won't bore you with all the locations where he lived and served. But Richard Hacklett learned that he just was not going to be able to come to the New World, and he had wanted to from the time, as it stated in his earlier quote, he wanted to be the one to come and lead the group spiritually, and so he
Hmm.
he chose Robert Hunt to come. Robert Hunt was beloved in England and beloved here, and he died. I think just the next year. They were getting sick. The water here was
Wow.
bad over there where they were living, and so he died in the fall of 1608. But there is even a shrine over there to Robert Hunt that was put there in 1956 to commemorate the 350th anniversary of he well he arbitrated every argument. He spoke the truth to them in love through God's word, through the weekly sermons. And I've even known of the Anglican schedule being 2 sermons a day. You know, a sermon in the morning, a sermon at night. I've read about that, and and he took care of every one of the sick. He just shepherded those people as a father, an older brother. He looked
Right.
after them. And one of the quotes on his shrine is that 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 all that happened to him, he never repined. And that is a word we don't use any longer. But he didn't whine about it, and he figured that it was all part of God. You know, what was going on was part of God's will, for him. So and there I actually had to chuckle when I first moved here in 1986, and we lived in Virginia Beach, and we went to a church in Virginia Beach, and I chuckled because every third person that I met in Virginia Beach claimed ancestry back to Robert Hunt. That is how long his beloved memory flowed to. And
I'm gonna
so
have to do
he
some research on that and see if I have some ancestry that goes back there.
I know. I have ancestry in Virginia that goes back at least to 1630, and I won't bore you anymore with that. But it's always a fun story for yourself to find out your ancestry. But so anyway, so with John Smith, he um he was quite a colorful character. He was raised in a Puritan village. His father died when he was young, which
Oh,
actually young, like, again, 12 or 14, which released him from um the idea that his father had for him to go toward, you know, his goals. And he was able to go out and adventure on his own. So he took books into the forest and taught himself
right.
sword play, and, you know, all the things that you would need as a soldier, and became um, a mercenary for different places. He actually, in a contest, he had to he was forced into this contest, but in this context he killed three Turks. Huh. And he was
Oh,
given a shield, you know, a coat of arms, and given the title captain. And his coat of arms, you can look it up. You can Google Captain John Smith's coat of arms, and it has the head of 3 Turkish soldiers
oh,
on it. And they were, you know, that we call ourselves a kinder, gentler nation, a kinder, gentler generation. They were pretty rough then. I mean, It was how it was. So he came back to England and was hired by the Virginia Company to bring the group over here. He actually was thrown overboard at a
Oh
point
dear.
because it was a Roman Catholic operated ship. The ship was operated by a Roman Catholic captain, Roman Catholic crew. Now,
Mm.
everybody in the world thinks that their group is the right group with the right
Right.
ideas. But back then, if you didn't have their ideas, the person in charge, you were kind of in trouble. So they threw him overboard, and he swam to shore on this island and waited to be picked up by another ship.
My
So
goodness.
he had lots and lots of adventures. Funny enough, people have tried to disclaim a lot of his adventures, but there have been people in recent decades who have been able to retrace some of that and found that he was telling the truth. He just, well, he didn't mind talking about himself. But when he came over here, they were mad at him because he thought that he could captain the ship a little better than the guy who was doing it. So they put him in, they had him in the brig. But so when they got here and they opened up the black box on the ship, he had been made a member of the council. So they had to let him go. And that was providential. He providentially was given his freedom. And so the men wanted him to be their leader, and he would not allow them to build a home for him until all of them had a roof over their head, over
Oh,
their head first. So
An
he
amazing
had some
guy.
real benevolence. He also was able, and who knows why, he wasn't that big of a guy, but he had fiery red hair and blue eyes, which meant that he looked very, very different than the Algonquin people. Maybe that was one of the reasons that they, who knows, that might have been one of the reasons why they were taken with him a little bit. He had some ins and outs with them, which I won't turn on the fire hose again right there.
no, no, I
But
think that's great. People are going to be encouraged by your book. Hey, Bill, I wanted to ask you as you're listening to her, what today are you taking away from that? I mean, I think it's so fascinating, but what is
One
hitting you
of the
right
things I'm taking away from this is the spiritual foundations of this country from the earliest
Mm,
days of the
mhm.
settlers who came
right?
here
What
to
our
settle this
foundation was.
nation.
Yes.
From the very earliest days of our nation, the Christian heritage is what the foundation of our nation is. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, if you
Yes,
happen, I don't know if it's likely or not, if you happen to have any sermons that were preached by him, uh,
Robert
by him.
Hunt. Do
I would
you
love
know?
to get my hands on one.
Yes, yes, I think that's an excellent question, and I don't think so because, right after they got there, they had a big fire, and Robert Hunt's library was burned to the
Oh,
ground.
how
So
tragic.
he lost a lot. That was one of the things for which he didn't repine. He didn't say, "I wish I'd never come." He
Right,
didn't snivel. He just went on with the goodness of God and the providence of God, which I don't think we live with that well in
right.
ourself. I mean, but I will think about that and see if
That would
there's
be good if we could find something like that maybe back in England
Amazing
because the ser-
transcripts or yes.
the sermons that were preached from those eras, from that period of history, are just phenomenal. And
it
they
is.
didn't people like Robert Hutton would have said, separation of church and state. I can't talk about this.
Mm-mm.
I can't talk about politics. I'm sure that
Right.
most of the sermons that
Yeah.
were preached from that era really were laden with politics, political talk, and
Well, they were. Yeah. Well, do you know in Proverbs at the very end, like 28 and 29, the beginning of one at the end of the other, it says, when the wicked rule, men hide themselves. And when the righteous come to power, men come out of hiding. And
Mhm.
so the people back then during that Reformation era, they enjoyed sermons like that because
Yes, they did.
that's another point about the integration in the English Protestant Reformation. They did not see a difference between the sacred and the secular. They believed that God established the ecclesiastical sphere or the church sphere, and God established also the civil sphere, and expected us to hold the civil sphere accountable. And that was what those election sermons that Reverend Bill Cook talks about were all about, was that the church was responsible to hold the civil accountable, and it was considered an integrated part of life, and both important when well let's see. So when they met for their council meetings, they met, God forbid, in their church building, because when the English moved somewhere, the church was what they built first. And
Right.
they met in their public meetings. They met in the church. They had no compunction of, it not being sacred enough.
We see the decay of conscience in our nation today that's so pervasive, and it's so disheartening and discouraging, so troubling.
Mhm.
And but that wasn't the way things always were. And
Uh,
if we still had pulpits I'm reading something earlier about, and we know that he wasn't a Puritan. That they weren't the Puritans that came to Jamestown, but John Wingate Thornton in the 19th century wrote in a story, and he wrote that to the pulpit, the Puritan pulpit, we owe the moral force that won our independence. That's what an historian said. They understood that the pulpit was seminal to the founding of the nation, to the
mhm.
foundations of our culture, and we need to get back to that. We need to recover
Yeah,
that
yeah.
understanding that the pulpit is seminal to recovering the blessings of liberty. Um, so
Amen. That's right. But now I have read though that there are many, many of the pastors that were here and they called them presbyters, that were here in the 17th century were Puritan. They all used the Geneva Bible, and that's what the
right,
Pilgrims
I
um
believe it.
talked about. And to mention Pocahontas, she she had a real affinity for the English from the beginning, and she was about 11 when she first met them and started
Wow.
coming, and she had a real tender heart toward the fact they were starving, and she brought them food. And that's another thing that was said about the English, is that they were lazy. Well, John Eidsmoe has written wonderfully about this, that uh, um, they were taught one thing. They were kind of Johnny One Note in their teaching. Warriors, soldiers were not taught to garden. There were things that they just didn't know, and weren't as prepared for. And also, they came here right in the middle of an 11-year drought that was actually an 800-year severity of drought. And
Wow.
that has
Wow.
been found in the cypress trees, that you can't touch a cypress tree now, but when they cut them down and they looked at the rings, they could see where there was absolutely zero growth. There was a thickening there. There was no growth there, and they could tell that there was no water there, and that they had been there in a drought. So Pocahontas, and I think I already mentioned that John Smith said God made Pocahontas. In other words,
Um,
God providentially prepared her, and then of course more things happen in her life, which I wrote about a lot of this in this book, and she eventually comes to know the Lord Jesus. That's another thing that they say in in this other literature that you will find in other classrooms and other places, is that she was forced into the life with the English, and that she was that it was an arranged
Right.
marriage, and she was forced to marry John Rolfe. And we all know as Christians that the salvation is a work of the Holy Spirit, and you don't really fake that. And you can look it up. It's on my website. My website is His Story. That's history with 2 S's.
Okay.
His Story, Virginia, 1607. And of course it's .com. And I have on there, it's called Letter from a Gentleman, 1614. And it's the letter that John Rolfe wrote to Sir Thomas Dale asking for Pocahontas's hand in marriage. That would be because she was the daughter of a national leader, and he was a hardworking middling class, so he really didn't have the station to just walk into the woods and ask Pocahontas to marry him. And it is an absolutely beautiful letter. And I have a page and a half. I'm kind of proud of this work I did. I have about a page and a
You
half.
should be. That's amazing.
Pardon me?
That's
You should be
amazing.
proud of it.
And you should be proud.
Chris,
But
I'm sitting here
Yeah.
listening to you, and I'm realizing what a wealth of history you are. You're
Indeed.
talking about Jamestown, but you know so much about history from a broader perspective. I think you've got a second book in you.
Oh yes,
Well,
absolutely.
I do. The preschool through 2nd grade version of this book is coming out hopefully in time for Christmas gift giving. I'm not 100% sure, but it is written in Dr. Seuss verse style, and it's a picture book. And so I've got that one, but I also have been working on, and so I've become, I was just kind of a nobody. I was a real political junkie and did a lot of lobbying and letter writing and things like that. Never saw myself as an author, and now I'm an author and a book publisher because I'm publishing 2 books right now. But I'm also working on, and this is really taken up a lot of time, so I haven't been able to get back to my curriculum, but I'm writing lesson plans for older children, which will certainly be
Wonderful.
interesting
That
to
is
read
awesome.
to adults. And I just have to have time to get back to that. But look up the John Rolfe's letter. It's Letter from a Gentleman, 1614. You can even Google it and get it.
Nice.
And I condensed it down to fit at the bottom of this page right here.
Nice. Okay.
And that's
Very
I
cool.
don't know about you, Bill. We could probably go on for another hour, but I just want to make
sure.
sure people can have access to your book with the holidays coming up.
Mhm.
And how we can help in
Chris,
this.
I would say, when I go to speak places around the country in different places, and I will be doing that coming up in the future, I would love to take your book and make
Well,
it available.
I would love for you to do that. I would love for you to do that.
This
So
is,
we could-
when you disconnect the people from their history, basically
Yeah.
they become fodder for tyranny. And so
That's
it's
right.
yes.
imperative, that, especially in this nation, that Americans reconnect with their true history. It's the most amazing history of the founding of a nation in existence.
Yes.
It really
Yes.
is. Maybe I actually think the founding of America is more significant than the founding of Israel as a nation. Israel was amazing, miracles, Red Sea open, but
Mhm.
America is just as miraculous. And people need to understand how special this country is.
Well,
It
that's
is.
true. We are the bride of Christ. The church is
Yeah.
the bride of
Right.
Christ. So
Well, you know what? The truth is coming out with this administration, and things are being revealed that weren't be revealed before. We want to have you back, Chris.
thanks. I would love that.
We can delve into even more. And Bill, thank you so much. This has been so great. I look forward to
My
learning
honor.
more.
It's been a pleasure,
Bill.
Chris.
Gosh.
I didn't hear that, Bill. I'm sorry. What was that
I
last
said it's
thing?
been my honor, and it's been a pleasure to have
Oh,
you.
my goodness. Thank you. I was honored to be asked. I was thrilled to be here. And it's always a little unnerving to step in front of the camera, but
You know your craft. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know your substance. That's very important. We
Well,
can
thanks.
glean from that. So thank you so much.
Well, just don't forget Odyssey of Faith on Amazon Book,
Yes.
and they'll send it right to your
Great.
door. And Bill, you and I'll have to get together on how you can take this with you.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
love it.
And for
Well,
those
God bless. Oh, go
for the
ahead.
other listeners on the show today, please check out our website, America's Black Robe Regiment, at brrusa.org. .org, where you can donate and support our efforts around to take this message of the pulpit and what it did around America.
And there's also a link there where you can order and purchase and
Yes.
start to becoming the new you, going into 2026
Amen.
with Cardi Miracle.
Right.
It really does put a skip back in your step. So God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much for being on our
Thanks,
podcast.
Chris. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Miracle, and thank you all.